This morning we get to hear a story. It's one story. There's 4 parts to the story of some in our body who've chosen to live the journey of generosity and lived it in such a way that it's tangible what God has done and is doing, not just in them, but in those around. And quite frankly, you are a very integral part of this story. So I'm going to invite up Mike Vogt, one of our elders, and Mike is kind of the country champion, our partnership in South Sudan, and our global partner, James Baak, is in town with us this past week. And so, Mike, James, come on up here and join me. I'm going to pull our table back, and you welcome them. Yes, would you do that? Please welcome them. I get to sit, I got them in the middle because I want your attention upon them. I'll interject myself here and there in their story because it really is our story. Very much we're all a part of it. Mike, I'll let you start just getting us reacquainted, because many of you know James, but getting reacquainted with James, your relationship together.
Yeah, absolutely. Good morning. How's everyone doing today?
Good.
Very good. Yeah, it's good to be with you this morning, and I have a chance to share kind of a story of generosity that's got sort of 4 different parts or 4 different chapters to it. The first portion of the story is going to be the generosity of James. And what you're going to see as we listen to the story is that James received generosity, and then he extended generosity to others. And what I want James to start off with was James found himself in a refugee camp when he was 13 years old. How many of you have heard the story of the Lost Boys of Sudan? Can you raise your hand if you've heard this before? There's a number of lost boys that have resettled here right in Nashville. But James was one of the lost boys of Sudan who walked as a 13-year-old over 1,000 miles on foot to get to safety in a refugee camp in Ethiopia. I'm not sure when the last time was that you walked from Nashville to Denver, but it's a ways. And most of the lost boys died along the way, but many of them got to the refugee camp. James was one of them. And when James gets to a refugee camp in Ethiopia, you had received generosity. Do you want to share a little bit about that, James?
Yes.
Yeah, you're on.
You're on. You hold it close to your mouth. There you go.
Yes, I was born in a village in South Sudan and raised up to the age of 13. And at that point in time, there was a civil war in South Sudan. And young boys who were fleeing to a refugee camp in Ethiopia. And as I arrived in the refugee camp, a friend of mine invited me to go to the church for the first time. I have never heard of the gospel, and I sat behind the church. And I met this pastor preaching from John 3:16, that God loved the world. He gave his only son so that anybody who believes in him will not die, but have eternal life. That message changed my life, to see that there is a God who loved me. If I believe in him, I will not die, but have eternal life. That changed my life, and I find myself crying, became part of the church, and continue. And in the church, I got people who loved me and were able to mentor me, and that is something important that I received during that time in the refugee camp. As I continued living in the refugee camp, I met a missionary man from California. He's called Mark Nickel. He was a missionary in the camp. He was teaching pastors, and we met with him. And as we interact and I share my history with him, he said, I am going to sponsor you for 4 years. In the camp, people just go up to a primary school level, and that is the end. But Mark Nickel took me and sponsored me for 4 years for high school education. So I received that also. So the 2 more important gifts, the Word of God that I received, and then an education. These are the things that were not existing in my village, and I received them.
That's awesome. So James would receive these 2 incredible gifts. He heard the gospel and becomes a follower of Jesus Christ, and he receives a high school education. These are 2 things that weren't available in the village where James was born and raised. Fast forward many years, James arrives into the refugee camp when he's 13 years old. He would then spend 13 years in the refugee camps. And an opportunity arose for James to start a new life. And I want you to share a little bit about the program that the United Nations offered to the Lost Boys when they heard about the plight of you and your friends.
Yes, United Nations and United States government, they put up a program of resettlement for lost boys to come to the United States and start a new life again. And we were in this camp called Kakuma Refugee Camp in Kenya, and it was the best news we ever had, that we are going to go to the US. We were hearing the United States is the best place on earth just next to heaven. And so that was an opportunity, amazing opportunity. All of us, we wanted to come. But at this time, I have read enough of the gospel, and I have also received that education. I was torn apart, either to go back to my village or come into the US to resettle. And I wrestled with that. I closed myself in the room and cried, but God was telling me to go back. Again, God was telling me to go back. I wrestled with that, and at the end of the day, I made a decision to go back. I was going back to go and share the gospel and also share the education that I received. I felt a personal responsibility, and what God helped me to see during that time, God opened my eye that myself and what I have been given, and I felt a personal responsibility to go back and give to my people. And I was able to turn down coming to the US and went back home. It has been 13 years. I have never heard of my parents, but God was telling me back just to go to the village to share what I have been given.
Can I interject something before you get there? So James is literally given a pamphlet. I call it a golden ticket to come to the United States, start a brand new life. And so James, all he has to do is fill out a form. And when he does that and gives it back, he has received his golden ticket. Tell a story about what you did with the form and the man who you were to give the form to.
Yes, there were forms that were being filled, a lot of forms. So I had literally taken the form so that I fill it. And as I pray, God is telling me to go back. So I took it after I made a decision to go back to my country. I took the form and went back and gave it to him. The man told me, you have not filled the form, why? I said, I don't want to go to the US, I want to go back home. And he said, war is still going on there. What if you are going to be killed? I said, millions have died in South Sudan. If I die, I am just one person. And I walk away. He saw me like a crazy young boy. Mm-hmm. But anyway, I went away and was able to go back to my village.
Mm-hmm. So he rejects the offer of an easier life. Leave all the hardship of your journey and your struggles for the last 13 years behind. Here's a fresh start. He gives him a golden ticket. But James is feeling like, I've heard the gospel and I've been given an education. No one in my village has received either of these two gifts. He gives back the golden ticket and he goes home. So tell me what happened when you got home.
Now, when I arrived home, it has been 13 years. I heard that my village was destroyed and my father and my mother and my sibling were no more. So I was not expecting anybody. They had also heard that I have been no more a long time ago. And so when I went back, I landed on in a plane and came out and kneeled down and actually took the soil and prayed. And I was in tears. Then later on, someone recognized me and said, you look like a son of Niall. I said, yes. He said, I know where your parents are. Mm-hmm. And he led me to the village. Our village was destroyed, but they ran to another village. And I was able to see my father and my mother. We held ourselves in that moment, something like 15 minutes, just crying, no one talking. It was something amazing. My mother was excited that I am back. We are born, nine of us, 5 died in young. And I was counted among the one who have died. And when I went back, my father also was was excited. 2 bulls were slaughtered for a big celebration for a week in our community. And it was very exciting. And I was able also to share the gospel right there. And this is what I told them, that I believe in a God called Jesus Christ. He saved my life and brought me back to you. If you believe in him, he will protect you, protect your goats, your cows, your chicken, and he will protect you with everything. And that was the message that I shared with them during that time. And I was able to lead my village, my sibling, my father and my mother to Christ.
And it was the first of, yeah. That would be the first of many churches that James would begin in South Sudan. So the story of James is this long, and we've got this much time today. So let me fast forward a little bit on the journey. James receives generosity, and then he returns generosity by going home with what he's been given, these 2 incredible gifts. Fast forward the clock a little bit. At Fellowship Bible Church in 2006, Meredith Kinder, one of the staff members here, had said, hey, we're sending a team to South Sudan, and you should go, Mike. And I said, you've got to be kidding me. Why do you think I should go to South Sudan? And he says, you've got a Bible school education. You've been to Bible school, you've been to seminary. We're looking for people that can help train pastors in this region. I said, I'm not qualified. He's like, trust me, you're qualified. So I went on this trip and I met James Baak in 2006. You can see that's a long time ago based on how aging works. So I meet with James in this village, and we're meeting with a group of pastors underneath a massive tree, and I'm teaching pastors. There's about 40 or 45 pastors that were meeting underneath this tree. Most of them don't even own a Bible, and they are the pastors bringing the gospel to their village. The ones who do have a Bible can't even read it. And I remember this first trip going, holy cow, there is so much to do here. Where do you start? And I remember calling my wife from a satellite phone on one of the evenings on that trip, and she said, how's it going? And I said, babe, I don't know how to describe it. I feel really useful here. We were business owners at that time. I was running a franchise. We had a lot of employees. We had a lot of customers. We were successful. But when I went to South Sudan and I was teaching a group of pastors underneath a tree, I'm like, wow, I feel useful. I feel like God is putting me to work for something that he is trying to see through. And it was just an incredible experience. Do you remember that first trip?
Yes. Mike came with a group from Fellowship Bible Church, and they had one full week of training pastors, training women, training teachers and Sunday schools. It was a big week. And then the time came when they were to go back. When they were going back in the airport or airstrip during that time, they didn't want to go, and they were all crying like babies. And our community have never seen how a white man or a white woman cry, and it was something like a movie. They were crying and talking, and it became a talk in our village. I had to go and push them, literally, really, to go to the plane so that they can be able to go. The pilot was impatient because they were talking with this person, and the plane is waiting. So I was able to push them, and we knew there was something unique in these people. And since that time, they have been back year in, year out, since 20 years ago. Mm-hmm. And that relationship has been established with Fellowship Bible Church for 20 years. It has literally changed our village. Mm. And I want to tell Mike, why were you crying?
Yeah.
I was crying because I saw a man with so much passion, so much desire to see his country transformed, but starting with his village. And again, he had this much vision and this much passion and this much resources. And the work that he was up against was daunting. And when I got on that plane, he was right. I'm like, I don't want to go. I knew I had to go. I was going to leave, but I knew I was going to be back. And the question is, when I come back, what can we do that would help James get a little bit further towards his vision of bringing the gospel and education to his people? And I literally today, I've been back to South Sudan 12 times since that first trip. My 13th trip will be in 6 weeks. I literally count my days, the time before I knew James Baak and the time after I knew James Baak. It has had that great an impact on my life. With your permission, I want to share another story of generosity in South Sudan, and it is an incredible story of a young boy whose name is Angelo. I literally met Angelo on my first trip to South Sudan. This is 2006. This is the pastor's meeting under the tree I was just sharing with you. There was a 12-year-old kid that snuck into pastor training. He's in the front row and he's holding a Frisbee. That's him right there. Angelo snuck in because there was nothing else going on in the village that day, and he heard that there were some white people that were meeting, so he snuck in and he sat in the front row. And as we're training pastors, there's a language barrier, and so after about 15 or 20 minutes, I say, okay, who knows the answer to this question? And I say, who wants to raise their hand? And Angelo in the front row shoots his hand up. And I said, okay, youngster, what's the answer to the question? He got it exactly. I'm like, okay, he's listening. Teach you a little more and say, all right, who knows the answer to this question? And Angelo's like, oh. Yes, youngster, what's the answer? He got it exactly. It became clear that this 12-year-old boy who snuck into pastor training was the smartest guy in the room, and he wasn't even invited. Now, God had just given this kid a really good head on his shoulders. What I learned about Angelo is that he's an orphan. His parents died when he was young of treatable illnesses, but there's no medical care in this part of the world. So Angelo was an orphan. Him and his 4 younger siblings were orphans, and they were being cared for by this guy. They were being kept alive by James Baak. They were being fed, clothed, sheltered by James Baak and one other pastor in the village named Abraham to simply meet their very, very rudimentary physical needs. But we fell in love with Angelo because he was so engaging, so bright. And when I got on the airplane that first year, I kind of thought to myself, I wonder what's going to come of Angelo. I wonder if he'll be like the mayor of Vietnam one day or something like that. But there was no opportunities for this kid because his parents were deceased. He had no resources, just a really good brain. Well, let me advance a little bit. We'd go back year after year after year, and every year we saw Angelo, he couldn't wait to spend time with our team. Really sharp, really bright, really engaging. And our team of people that went on this trip, Lloyd Shadrach included, we decided to pool our resources and send Angelo away to high school. So Angelo was shipped off to Kenya to go to high school, again, because there's no high schools in this region. And we invested in Angelo for him to get a 5-year education to finish off a high school education. After that, he'd return to the village. What was it like when Angelo came back?
Angelo came back, and we had a primary school in our village, and Angelo became one of the teachers. And because he's very bright, all teachers were consulting him. We find him teaching Sunday schools. He was able to be everywhere and really immerse himself in the service of the community and service of our church. And everyone liked him.
Mm-hmm. Fast forward the clock some more. So I'd come in one year and Angelo would say, Mr. Mike, I'd love to have a meeting with you. I said, okay. He said, let's meet tonight by the fire. And he would tell me that night for the first time, he says, Mr. Mike, I feel like God is calling me to become a doctor. And it made sense because he lost his parents due to treatable illnesses. There is needless suffering that's rampant in the village, but there's no medical care. So it makes sense that Angelo would want to become a doctor. And he says, I feel God is calling me to become a doctor. I said, I don't know how the Lord will see this through, but I will pray for you that the Lord might make a way. Come back the next year. This was 12 months later. We land and we are teaching pastors, and I see Angelo. Mr. Mike, I'd like a meeting with you. Okay, sounds great. I said, let's meet by the fire tonight. He says, Mr. Mike, I feel like the Lord is calling me to become a doctor. And I say, okay, I think that's a beautiful dream, and I don't know how the Lord will see it through, but let me clarify my position. I said, look around you in the village, Angelo. No one else has received a high school education but you. And I feel like I could help 20 people, 50 people to receive a high school education, the gift that you've already been given. I feel more responsible to help 50 people than I do to help you to go from here to here in your education. I said, I'm sorry, I don't know how that will be seen through, but the Lord can do anything he wants to. I'll trust the Lord to provide for you. And he said, I understand. Come back the next year. Mr. Mike, I'd like a meeting. I said, sure. And he said, Mr. Mike, I've decided to not become a doctor. I said, why? And he said, because the Lord has not made a way. And I felt my heart break in that moment because he was giving up on his dream. And so I could have just let that sail by, but I really felt what could only be the Holy Spirit in my heart that said, keep going. So I said, all right, Angelo, let's look into this. Let's explore this and talk about it a bit further. And we did some research, and James spoke to a lot of different post-secondary education institutions. Long story short, Angelo was accepted to Kenya Methodist University to study a bachelor's degree of medicine and surgery. It was a 6-year program. My friends, may I introduce to you Dr. Angelo.
Yeah.
He graduated in December, and he's finishing off his internship right now. And Vietnam has a doctor for the first time in its history.
Yeah.
It's incredible. Here's what's cool. James receives generosity and goes home. Angelo receives generosity. Angelo's going home. They took what they received and they're choosing to give back. But the story doesn't end there. Lord, do you want to talk a little bit about the generosity series?
Yeah, so it was just over 2 years ago, we sensed the Spirit prompting us to take a step of faith. And that was for us to pay off our mortgage. Many of you were here for that. And so the elders, Mike included, said, let's do this now. Now's the time to do it. It's just that sense. Rob and I talk to you often about, the Spirit-filled life is to hold your sail up and catch the wind of the Spirit and then go where the Spirit leads. And we felt that was where the Spirit was leading. And so we invited you. We said, here's, 175 families gave this much to put this campus here. But we've had a mortgage on it, and we've been in it 20 years. Let's all now who've enjoyed this, let's pay off our mortgage. And we said, let's just invite people to do it, and let's do it. Well, the wind of the Spirit blows, and in our elders, and they said, if we receive more than the mortgage, it was $2.5 million to pay off, then let's just give it away. Let's not hold it for the future buildings or hold it for anything else. And so we came to you. Do you remember this? And we said, whatever comes in above and beyond the 2.5, we're gonna give that away. Wind of the Spirit is blowing, and we understand now our partnership with El Shaddai here, long-term partnership with El Shaddai Church. They are right at the point at which they can get ready to move back into their church. They were flooded out in 2010. They've been meeting in a church up the street for a decade. They've gotten all the paperwork done, all the historical work done, et cetera, because it's a historic landmark, and they're ready to go back in. They need just over $900,000 to go in, back in, renovate and go back in without any debt. And so the elders said, hey, let whatever comes in above and beyond our paying off our debt, let's give some of that toward El Shaddai. And so on this day, if you were there, it was a crazy morning. We handed El Shaddai a check for just over $900,000 after we paid off our mortgage, over $900,000 to them. And by the way, can I give you an update here? Because Tom Moore, who's our member, who's overseeing that with them, he just mentioned they just poured the concrete in the sanctuary. They hope to be in there before Thanksgiving. So they're getting really close to being complete. Gave the check to Pastor Herman and Margaret. And then what we also announced on that day was, y'all, we still have right at $1 million beyond. Paid off our mortgage. Gave them just over $900,000. We've got right at about $1 million. And so a team of you were formed to help determine where's the Spirit leading that we might distribute this money as well.
What an incredible problem to have. We've got $1 million left over. How do we do good with this? So at the time of the Generous God series, James's organization on the U.S. side that I'm a part of, we are preparing for Angelo's return to Vietnam. And we can either say, hey, good luck. Here's some syringes, here's some gauze and bandage. Go meet people under that tree. Hope it works out well for you. Or we can set him up for true success by giving him a medical facility. What we ended up doing was I wrote a letter of appeal to Fellowship Bible Church saying, hey, it's going to cost us about $250,000 to build a medical clinic for Angelo. We had gotten some architects' renderings of this, and we wrote a letter to Fellowship saying, would you consider giving us $80,000 to start construction on this, and we'll raise the rest of it. And we built it. So this medical clinic is now standing in Vietnam, South Sudan. It's called the Achiek Women's Clinic. And the naming is actually very significant. Angelo and James collaborated on the decision to name it this. Do you want to speak about that for a bit, James?
Yes. The word Achiek means creator. And we know the give of this medical clinic was something that God started himself. And we want to honor God for giving us that clinic. And we want also to honor women. Women have been the most people who have suffered in our village. Because when there is complication of giving birth, normally what happens is the mother and the child die because there's no surgery that can be done to remove the child. And the nearest clinic is like 100 miles. And when women have complication and they start moving to that, they will not reach. They die on the way. Mm-hmm. And so we want to honor children and women, but the clinic is open to the community.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Lloyd, did you want to speak about Cole?
Yeah,
in this
I did, because
photo?
I want you to catch this picture here. You say, well, who's here on the right? That's Dr. Cole Barfield, a member of our body, Cole and Kristen Barfield. And here's what's fascinating. You think about how God works in ways we can't even comprehend. When Cole was in medical school, he had some students alongside him going through medical school from Africa. And so Cole, post-graduation, had started a medical clinic in Africa. And so who better to help Mike, James, Angelo to start a clinic, in Africa than Cole. And so Cole was with you guys, of course. And I just love the connection of that God continues to use you in ways way beyond anything we could ask or imagine. Like, it's kind of like you step back and you say, God's like sort of in control of all of this and ordering these things. And y'all, indeed he is.
We've seen so many incredible provisions that could only have come from God throughout this entire story. But let me give you a quick photo of the clinic as it stands today. So it's up and running. This was at the grand opening celebration a few months ago. There was a formal ribbon cutting. The Ministry of Health was there. We had some VIPs from the county and stuff like that. So do you want to just share a little bit about the celebration on this day?
Yes. During this time when the clinic to be open, our community turned up together to celebrate. Ministry of Health came, a minister came to open it and give us green light for us to be able to operate the clinic. It was a time of dancing. It was a time of praising God, and a lot of things have happened there. And since that time, since last year, it has been operating. Children or women who should have died now, they are alive because of that clinic, and we thank God.
It's been an unbelievable story. And again, this is the generosity of fellowship. We had surplus from the Generous God series that we were able to pursue this and go down this road. So it was the generosity that you had received that you gave back and you reinvested. Then that money was deployed around on the other side of the world and is now saving lives.
Yeah.
It's incredible.